and welcome to the channel. My name is Mel and I'm a knitter and crafter living on the Orkney Islands off the north coast of Scotland. I live here on our small holding with my husband John, our 2 cats and a multitude of chickens and ducks. If you are new here, then welcome to the channel, and if you are a returning viewer, then welcome back. Thank you for coming back. So I have 2 finished objects to share this episode and 2 new cast-ons, I think, maybe 3, but I have 3 works in progress and I don't remember which ones I'd cast on before the last episode. So first finished object is what I am wearing, and I haven't woven in the ends yet or blocked this, but this is my finished Silverleaf shawl and I will take it off to show you. This is a design by Lisa Haynes, I believe. Yes, Lisa Haynes. And this is the design. And it's just called Silverleaf. This pattern was kindly gifted to me by a viewer, and it is a shawl that I've been meaning to knit for several years with some yarn that I've also had for several years. So it is a asymmetrical triangle shawl that you cast on at the very tip and then keep increasing with this lovely garter and eyelet design, which is nice and simple and really mindless knitting until you get to the border at the bottom. And the border is a, if I get to show you the border, is a lacy leaf design, which isn't really showing up very well on camera, but it is very nice. I have an idea. Let me see if I can hold it against something so that the, oh, tell you what would make it even better, if I showed you the, there, I'm eating my hair, if I showed you the front of the shawl and not the back. That is why it's not showing up. That is the front. Like it is stockinette background, which is why it wasn't showing up on the pearl side, but it does have this lovely leafy border to it, which actually shows up a bit better further back rather than with my patterned dress as the background behind the stitches. I have a little bit of this yarn left over, and if I'd known that I was going to have so much left over, I probably would have knit more of the shawl before I got to the border and then made the border longer and then made a narrower finishing edge. In the pattern you do 1 garter band, this garter band, and then cast off, but because I had so much yarn left and I wanted just a little bit more length to drape around my neck, I actually did another row of eyelets and a second garter band before casting off. And I just cast off with a stretchy bind off in knit, and it's made just a straightforward knit bind off. The pattern tells you to just do a regular knit bind off, but I do quite a tight bind off when I knit, when I bind off in a regular bind off. So it has come out really nice. The yarn that I used, I bought many moons ago, back at the last Edinburgh Yarn Festival that took place, and I have this much left of this yarn. The colourway is called Dreek, and it is a stellina, merino nylon stellina base, and the dyer is no longer dyeing yarn, unfortunately, but it is Old Maiden Ant yarns, and which is a real shame because I used to love her colourways. And I have a few more of her yarns that I bought at the same time still in stash for another shawl, actually. So I'm really happy with this. It's a bluish grey silver yarn, and it's exactly what I was looking for when I went to Edinburgh with this shawl design in mind. I wanted a silvery yarn to go with the Silverleaf pattern, and it worked out perfectly. I just need to weave in all the ends, which I hadn't remembered that I'd forgotten to do. I thought I had done it. As for blocking it, maybe I will, because it is lace. I might block it just to even out the lace work, but I won't be pinning it out. I'll just block it and kind of lay it out flat. kind of semi-dry, and then basically I will hang it on the radiator or on an airer or something. I don't really pin out shawls unless they really need some proper shaping, and once a shawl goes around your neck you can't really see the design anyway, so I'm not going to be heavily blocking this. I have heavily blocked certain shawls before, but this one I don't think it really needs it. So that is my first finished object, and I think actually I might pop it back on because it is a little cool in here this morning. I don't think it's that cold outside. I think it just feels cold because it's quite damp, and that's making everything feel a bit colder today. So, other finished object, I'm reaching blindly behind me. I am doing a box of socks for my husband this year. I did one for myself last year and I made 25 pairs, I think. That was a lot of socks. It was definitely the year of the sock. This year I'm planning to do a pair of socks each month for my husband. So I've started out and finished these ones in January. It doesn't fit on the blocker very well because he has very large feet. But this is just a plain vanilla sock with my usual vanilla sock recipe, which is a Turkish cast on toe. I've done 60 stitches around, and for John I have done 60 rounds before starting the gusset. I did 20 increases on both sides for the gusset. I have done a eye of partridge on the heel turn right at the bottom, and I've actually done slip stitch ridges on the back. I don't know if that shows very, yeah, it shows a little bit on camera, which I don't bother with my socks. I usually just do stockinette, but my husband is more likely to wear these in boots, whereas I tend to wear mine around the house. I also did, I actually did 55 rounds for the leg this time. This yarn seems to work up at a higher roll gauge than the last pair of socks that I made for him, and I did a 2x2 rib with a stretchy bind off at the top. The yarns that I've used are West Yorkshire Spinners in the colourway Robin. West Yorkshire Spinners, that's a bit of a mouthful. West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply, which is their one that has 35% Blueface Leicester in amongst it, and the colourway Robin. I have quite a bit of this left, and I plan to use it for a pair of socks for myself that has colour work on the ankle. So there should be just enough of this yarn to do the sock, the body, up to that point on the ankle and just above the colour work before the rib. If I have enough to do the rib, I'll use it for that also. And the contrast toes and heels and cuff, I've used Drops Fable in the colourway 300, which is a dark, slightly heathered brown. It's actually a really nice dark brown, this one. It's dark brown, but it's not... I like brown yarns, but a solid dark brown can look a little bit... well, to me it just looks a little bit boring, so a lightly heathered one like this has just got a little bit of interest to it, and I really like it. So that is my second finished object, but that also kind of leads me on to one of my first works in progress whilst I have this knitting bag open, which is just one that I made with robins on, because it's that time of year. In fact, I just saw the robin in the garden this morning for the first time in a few weeks, just hopping about outside the living room window, so that made me very happy. I have cast on the second pair of socks for John this year, my February. You know, the more times you say the word February, it doesn't sound right. It's like, is it February? Is it February? February. And it is just another pair of vanilla socks. I think most of John's socks will be vanilla socks, although there is one or two patterns that I'm thinking about doing, probably in the summer. So I've only got, so far, I started these last night because I didn't want to work on my other current whips. So I've done a black toe, which is a little tricky by lamplight. I did start it in the daytime. And then this self-patterning yarn in greys and charcoals and a little bit of navy blue in there. So the yarns are just Drops Fable. I'm using number 400, which is the black, for the contrast toes and heels, and I do have another ball of this in my stash, so I have plenty. And for the main colour, the main body, it is colourway 913, and I've seen this called a couple of different names on Wool Warehouse. If it will focus, on Wool Warehouse it is called Winter, and on Ravelry it's called something, I think in Spanish, which maybe it's Spanish for winter, I'm not sure, because I can't speak Spanish. My sister can, I cannot. So both pairs of socks are knit on 2.25mm needles. I've used magic loop for toes, heels and cuffs, and I have used 9-inch circular for the main body, the body of the foot and of the ankle of both pairs of socks. So that's the socks out the way. Last year all I seemed to talk about on this podcast was socks. There'll be 3 or 4 pairs of socks each episode. This year I have many garments I want to get through, so maybe not so many socks. So works in progress. Let's start with the easier to get across here, which is, no, I had cast this on last episode, I just hadn't gotten very far. So this is my Isbre sweater that I'm sticking into a cardigan, and it's a bit ruffled because it's been stuffed in its bag. So I am knitting this as a cardigan rather than as a sweater. The design is the Isbre sweater by Ellie of Skein Dee Knits, and it is a relatively plain sweater with a narrow colourwork yoke. So the colourwork on the yoke is a quite relatively narrow design. It's quite simple and I really like it, and I pretty much stuck with the colours that she used. Well, I have stuck with the colours, just different yarns for what she used in the design. It is a quite low contrast, but I really like it. So it's a nice light grey and a mid grey for the chart. Modifications. Oh, I'll show you the design first and then we will talk modifications, because I have made 1 or 2, not many, but 1 or 2. So let's find the front. So like I said, it is the Isbre, although in black and white, actually in black and white it looks the same as it would in colour, but it's light grey with mid grey. It is the Isbre. Camera, focus. Isbre. And I am knitting this on 3mm needles at a 24 stitch gauge. Modifications. I have added, I think the design does have short rows in the back, but I have had to shift them because the beginning of round in this is in, well, for mine is at the front where the steek is, because that just makes more sense, and in the design it is either at centre back or on the back of one shoulder, I don't remember, but consequently I've shifted everything around. So I've shifted around all of my short rows below the neckline, and I actually shifted the colourwork chart as well, because the way the chart was landing, I didn't want the bottom of these points to be at the bottom here, because I didn't want it to look like downward triangles on the ladies. I just thought it might look, well, it probably would look fine, but I would see it and not be able to unsee it. So instead I have the peaks at the top rather than dropping down to the bottom where the ladies land. So yes, I have worked the colourwork chart and I'm just working down to the point where separating for sleeves happens, and I'm not sure if I'm going to adjust that stitch count slightly for bust circumference. Now that I've got so far, I can check my gauge and just see if I need to increase the stitches or decrease where the underarm is, which is the easiest part really. I think Ellie actually mentioned this in her last podcast, where she was adapting a pattern. But if I need to adjust on a pattern, especially on a colourwork yoke, I find sometimes colourwork round yoked garments can sometimes sit odd on me. So I have a large bust circumference, but I don't have overly broad shoulders. So garments will often increase sizes everywhere. So if I knit a colourwork yoked garment based upon my bust circumference, it will fit, but it can look really bulky in the shoulders. So sometimes I will knit a smaller size for the colourwork side, and before or as I get to separating for sleeves, I will increase the stitch count at that point so that it is wider for the bust, and then it just fits better overall. And like I said, Ellie did mention this in her previous podcast, and it's something I've done quite frequently the last probably couple of years as I've been knitting garments, is adjusting for that. And the first time I did it was when I was going to be knitting my Flora sweater by Melody Hoffman, and actually when I read the pattern she already did that. There was a set amount of stitches for the yoke for the first few sizes and then the next few sizes, and it was past the yoke part that they actually changed the stitch count for bigger sizes. And I was already going to do that, but it happened to land at the same time, so that was perfect. So I knew I was on track for it, which was great. This is currently on hold because I would like to finish off my other work in progress, which is taking far too long. I'll briefly touch on the yarns that I'm using, so there should be a full stop there. I will briefly touch on the yarns that I'm using. They are Drops Flora. They are both Drops Flora. The lighter coloured yarn is number 303, and the mid-colour yarn, which is this mid-coloured grey, is probably without a label actually. It is without a label, because why would I keep a label that I have to, for a yarn that I have to talk about on the podcast? Yeah, I found a stray label, 04. After all that, it's 04. So Drops Flora, which is a 65% wool, 35% alpaca blend, and it is one of my favourite bases from the Drops range for garments. I find that my stitch tension looks really sloppy with it, but that is because the alpaca doesn't have as much bounce to it that wool does. So wool kind of like fills in the gaps, but I find with the alpaca doesn't do quite as good a job as pure wool does. So you can see little where my increase and stuff are. They're definitely more prominent in the alpaca blend than it would be if I used Drops Fable or a pure wool yarn. So my other pattern is on the floor in pieces because it has been worked with for so long. So let's find, there we go. I have a picture to show you my final work in progress, and it's difficult to show because it's still attached to yarns, 2 balls of yarns, and I'm going to get in a tangle. So this sweater, cardigan, Swan Shawl hybrid has been on the needles for quite some time. This is the Witching Hour Swan Shawl, or the design is the Witching Hour Swan Shawl, and I have adapted it to make a fingering weight cardigan. I have 2 sleeves knit. Oh, that purple's looking really nice on camera. Well, it is in my viewfinder. And I have done the body down to just above the waistline, and it is sporting a steek in the middle. This cardigan has been knit and reknit. So I started this nearly 3 years ago, and I knit about that much of the yoke, so not much, and then it got put in a project bag and put away for 2 years. And this autumn I decided to pick it back up. At that point I was apologies for hitting the tripod with my needles. At that point I was knitting a sweater, and I decided this autumn I wanted to do a cardigan. I thought about just sticking what I had already done, but decided to rip it back and start again, which is why it now has a steek. So that's what I did. I knit the yoke. It took a little while because it is a rather large yoke. And then I knit the body down to minimum length, which was past where it is now. Again, put it on hold and then knit the sleeves. Sleeve number 1 took quite some time, which it always does, because I like to adjust my sleeves to fit me, so it can take a few attempts to get it just how I want it. And then the second sleeve was a breeze. I have done 1x1 rib on the cuffs and just a stretchy bind off. I think I did 10 rounds or something on the cuff. The neckline is also 1x1 rib, and then I put the cardigan on a much longer cable, my longest cable, and tried it on and decided I hated the way the body fit. It kind of ballooned out from the yoke, so it just flared. You can still see it flares out a little from the yoke, and because this is adapted from a swan shawl pattern done in a DK weight, whereas I've done this in a fingering weight, it's supposed to kind of flare out. You can kind of see that on the picture a little bit, the way it kind of flares out from the bottom of the yoke. The designer is Hannah Mann. I forgot to mention that, but it is written on there because it's not on the pattern anywhere, but it is Hannah Mann, and it is the Witching Hour Swan Shawl. So I tried it on and it flared terribly, partly because it had increases after the yoke to specifically make it flare, but also because the yarns that I'm using don't really have much drape. It didn't kind of pull straight down, they were just kind of kicking out and floating out. So the yarns I'm using are some of my own hand-dyed yarn, which this is because I've pulled it back from when I was a yarn dyer. This is 100% non-superwash Blueface Leicester in the colourway Spellbound, and it is a light fingering weight. And the contrast is a undyed non-superwash Shetland in oatmeal colourway. It's just a natural blend, which is a yummy colour. I love this colour, and I just hated it, so I ripped it right back to just past casting, just past separating for the sleeves, because I didn't want to rip out all the sleeves and everything. That would just be silly. And I've made some adjustments to try and alleviate the problem. So the first thing, which I still have to not fix but adjust, is all of the increases. I dropped my stitches down and took them out, so you can see these really sloppy sections here where I've taken out the increases. What I need to do now that I've got more fabric is go in with a spare needle and tug all this excess looseness either side of these increases to even out the stitches. So I have that to do, and also what I did was I added extra decreases for the waist shaping. So I have 2 sets of decreases for the front section, but I have many more decreases for the back to help pull in the back. I have quite a shapely back, shaped like a sway back, and garments can hang odd on me. If they have more waist shaping in the back, it just fits nicer, kind of like when you have a princess seam dress, it just hugs the body nicely at the back. So I have put decreases on the back every 5 rows and decreases on the front every 15 rows, and I am just above the waist now, so I think I will do one more set of decreases for the back, and then I will knit to I don't even think I will put increases back in. I think I will just leave it straight because I'm not making an extra long cardigan. It's going to be sort of hip length, so I probably won't even put any waist increases out. Maybe on the front, I'm not sure yet, I haven't decided. I need to decide because I will be knitting on this tonight and I will get to that point. So maybe I could try this back on again whilst it's still on a my longest cable, and make a decision on whether I want the lower part to increase out again. Probably not. I made that mistake with a garment recently that was relatively cropped, and I ended up having to rip it back out and knit it straight because I just didn't like the way it kicked out at the bottom. But this will be a little bit longer than that, so we shall see. We shall see with that. So I think that's everything. Oh, and I'm knitting this on 3mm needles, which is why the Isbre is on hold, because my needle tips are now on that and I just want to get it finished now. Oh, that's the thing. If you've been on a previous podcast, I mentioned that I didn't know why I had knit this on a 3.5mm needle. I still don't know why. I think it's to do with the oatmeal yarn being slightly thicker than the purple yarn. So I knit my sleeves, well, I knit my body first time round on 3.5mm needles, and I knit my sleeves on 3.5mm needles, but I'm knitting the body again on 3mm needles because it just looked really loose, a bit too, I mean it's quite a loose gauge now. It was even looser before. The sleeves didn't look so bad, but that's probably because they were knit on a shorter cable, but the body on such a long cable, it just looked messy. So I have gone down a needle size. It seems to be fine. You can't tell between the stitches below, just below the yoke, and the stitches past that. You can kind of see a line where I've restarted it, but I think that will block out and you can't really see it when the garment is just kind of hanging there. It's only if you're looking through the fabric itself. So that is another change I made to help bring in the shape of the garment and take more bulk out of it, rather than just having to rely on adding decreases everywhere, which might have looked a little odd. I might have got away with it, but I'm not 100% sure. So I've reduced the stitch count. No, I've reduced the gauge, which will make it smaller, added extra decreases to make it smaller in the back, and it's looking much better. I tried it on a few days ago. It has been on hold while I've been knitting socks and shawls, but I did try it on and it did look considerably better, even down to just the waistline, than it did before I ripped it back out. It was, I wouldn't say heartbreaking to have to do it, because it wasn't. I would rather re-knit things several times than finish it and not wear it because I don't like how it fits. So okay, that is all of my knitting items for this episode. Coming up, I have that cardigan to finish. I also have the Isbre to work on, and then I think I'm going to cast on some pattern socks for myself and another garment, because the Isbre, once I start working on that, will be my kind of stockinette knitting, and then I want something a little more complicated to work on. So pattern sock could work, but I also want to knit the Storm Sweater by who knit the Storm Sweater? Small, it's Petite Knit. I know it was something to do with small. Petite Knit Storm Sweater. So I'd like to cast that on, and that is really textured, so it is patterned all over. That is concentration type work, and I like a little bit of concentration work sometimes. On an afternoon, I like to do that sort of thing. So what else? Oh, let's talk briefly about other stuff other than knitting. So if you've been here recently, you will have heard that I am setting up 2 new YouTube channels. I did ask last time what your opinion was on either setting up new channels for different topics or to keep them on here, and I decided to go with the majority opinion, which was to keep the separate stuff on separate channels. So I have got 2 new channels that should be live by the time this podcast goes out, and I will drop the links for those down below. One of them is based upon what happens around here on the homestead. So it will be all like vegetable growing and harvesting, and also what gets used for produce wise in the kitchen. So it'll be all sort of cottagey, homesteady stuff. So vegetable growing and jam making and herbal teas and everything that you would consider kind of cottage crafts and homesteady crafts will be on that channel. That channel is Windy Cottage Homestead, and I will drop the link down below. If you've been here for things like Vlogtober and things like that, you will know the sort of stuff that will be on that channel. So I would be very happy if you'd come over and say hello and subscribe if you are interested in those sorts of topics. I will also have a second channel that I'm setting up called, I have to try to remember because I've just set them up. So it is Wild Heart Roaming Free, and it is my camping van adventures that I'll be taking part in. So if you were here for Vlogtober, you will know that I just got a small van for myself back then, and I'm converting it into a small camper van to go off on my own adventures off of the islands. Well, I'm sure there'll be some on the islands as well, because there's some of the Orkney Islands I've not visited and I would like to go over to them. But it's also an opportunity to go over onto the mainland and spend some time over there. So the first part of this kind of adventure, I'll be recording videos on converting the van into a camper. So today, for example, I'm removing the divider between the cab and the back part of the van to open up the space, and I will be doing tutorial videos on those tasks. So if anybody has vans or what have you, there will be kind of not tutorials, but you know, how to do things. But once the van is built, there will also be all my adventures and stuff, my vlogs, my adventures over the water, and I'm really looking forward to getting off island for a period of time. So I'm trying to race ahead and get this van build done as quickly as possible. So if you're interested in my camping, hiking, van type adventures, that link will also be down in the description box, so be welcome to see you over there too. And today I'm going to take this opportunity of the nice weather outside to do some work on the van. I have insulation ordered and looking forward to get the walls on, which will be at least a couple of weeks time. I need to get lots of insulation in there yet. There's a lot of work involved in the beginning part of the van, and I just want to get in there and buy a mattress and make a bed frame and get in there and cook stove and just go and be able to go somewhere with actual trees, with big trees, with forests. We don't really have that sort of thing in Orkney. We have a small woodland, Binscarth Woods, and you can walk through it in about 10 minutes. So I'm looking forward to being able to do proper woodland walks. So I think that's it for this episode. Hopefully it's not over long. I think it should be around the 30-minute mark this time, which is great. And I shall see you on the next episode. Thank you for watching, and bye bye.